Well, hello, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome again to another NEHT Discovery Education Pathway webinar, Advice for the Current Times. You know the format, you know the drill. These are really useful sessions, useful discussions for us school leaders who, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of crawling to the finish line, actually. I'm ready for some time off. It's been a really busy time for everybody, hasn't it, since Christmas? But I think we're all making tremendous progress, I hope. And I hope you are too. And I hope you're looking after yourselves as well. We always say in Pathway, don't we, that self-care is not a self-indulgence. It's a duty. But I don't know about you, but I think that's gone a little bit by the wayside over the last few weeks. So we need to regroup, think again about how we can look after ourselves over the Easter holidays and recharge our batteries. And I'm sure we're going to have some advice from our brilliant guest, who, of course, you all know and love, Guy, about how we can take some time for ourselves and some steps that we can take to improve our well-being. I know I'm ready to do that after a very busy term. But during this, you know, we like to have discussions. We like to keep it interactive. So if you'd like to join the chat, please do. At any point, I'll keep my eye on the chat stream and I'll feed your comments through to our brilliant speaker as we go along, rather than storing them up all up till the end. And Q&A again, of course. Post your questions into the question box if you like, and I'll keep my eye on that too. If you'd like to join any of us on social media, we tend to use #TheWholeTeacher to pass our comments and things and observations that we have about all things to do with Pathway. So please feel free to join in the chat on social media there. Well, we have a picture of two fine-looking young men, but we couldn't find those, so we've got these two instead. So it just remains really for me to welcome I'm going to say my brilliant friend, and the bat phone for me, and I think the bat phone for a lot of people in this job, is Guy. Guy, you're there. Fantastic. I'm so pleased you're there.
Hi, Andrew. Hi.
Great to see you. Great to see you again. And
thank you very much.
Half of everybody on the call, I know they'll all be very pleased to see you. We've got a packed agenda as always, haven't we, Guy? Do you want to just talk us through perhaps why you've chosen some of these items? Some important ones here.
Yeah, I will do, and welcome everybody, and I hope you enjoy this session. Yeah, at first glance, you might look at these and think they're not very relatable or interlinked in any way, shape or form. And that was by design, because I thought we're getting an awful lot of questions, you can imagine, at the NHT about COVID. Seem to be more cases of it now than there were before the outbreak. With the school, so that's why that's there. With the school break coming up, Easter, always a good time, and possibly the best time, with lighter evenings, and the summer not too far away, just to have a look at the school premises. And I say that because most building works need to be probably commissioned around now if you want them done in the summer, if not sooner. I think a lot of people will be looking to prepare themselves for staff appraisal. That will be coming up, and I know that most people I speak to certainly like to get those done this side of the summer break. Hopefully that will be the case in many cases, but just in case, I think there's some really helpful reminders there, Andrew, to make sure that you're as prepared as you can be. And sometimes, you know, sending the signals now to the staff that you will appraise in the forthcoming months is never a bad thing. And of course, we end on well-being because, one, I think it's a topic that is evergreen. It should be evergreen. And two, you know, hopefully most of us will be taking our foot off the gas a little bit from next Friday or the Friday after, depending where you are in the country or which country you're in, to have a sort of short break over the Easter period. So I think that what relates all of these topics together is their relevance rather than their sort of and their topicality. So I thought they were the right things to cover at this moment, and hopefully by the end of it others will too.
Brilliant. Great. Thank you very much, Guy, for a good quick summary of where we're going to go now. So shall we start with looking at life after COVID?
Yeah.
Sounds good, doesn't it?
I was determined not to call it COVID-19 something.
2 years ago now.
Yeah, it is almost to over 2 years, isn't it? March
2 years ago, yeah.
20th.
3 years ago.
I think what I wanted to do is cover a few points here, Andrew, because clearly since we last spoke and last held a webinar, the government have lifted all restrictions. And rather than relying on laws and statutes and regulations, they're relying on people's goodwill. And whilst that's great on the one hand, on the other hand, it creates an awful amount of uncertainty for people. And of course, more and more headlines are grabbing long COVID now as something that comes after COVID and is affecting those people that may have been more vulnerable at the beginning of the COVID outbreak anyway. So the question I think that's most commonly asked at the moment is, how do we treat COVID cases now? Before it was easy, we had the rules and regs, we just applied them and they got us through the last 2 years, whether we were in lockdown or not. Now everything's been lifted, we feel a little bit exposed. And number one, the government are having their door knocked down by the NHT, asking for them to produce some unambiguous support. That's a rather ambitious and optimistic knock on the door. So let me offer you an equally cogent position, I hope, for listeners. COVID is a respiratory infection. That's all it is. It's a respiratory infection. And I know some people have never got it, some people have had it, and some people have had it and been hospitalized and worse, but it is a respiratory infection. And before I say more, I must say to you that all of the information we're covering today will be covered in a document that I've produced and will be available to everyone, I think 24 hours after this webinar. The Public Health Agency, which is a body that most people will have heard of, have produced some really good guidance for dealing with respiratory infections. And the link to their guidance is in the document that will be available. It's a great document, actually. It's a printable, downloadable color poster, which you can print off at school and put in the office, put in the staff room. And effectively, although COVID isn't explicitly spoken about in that document, there is a little section on it called respiratory infections and respiratory diseases, and that's where COVID should be dealt with. The other piece of strong advice I'd be telling, there it is. Thank you very much.
Just quickly sharing it. Yeah, that's what you're
talking about. No, that's great. And just down there in the purple boxes, you'll see respiratory infections. And that's really the long and the short of it. But there's some other really helpful guidance there. I think this is something that should be printed and put in school offices in any event. As you'll see, it's about schools and childcare settings.
Absolutely.
Which procedures should you use? Well, your good old sickness absence procedures. You may want to consult with HR, because HR, if they've got their head screwed on, your HR providers perhaps would have amended their recent sickness absence procedures with perhaps even appendix to cover COVID and long COVID. Long COVID is now sort of beginning to take hold and emerge as a recognizable disease. It's not yet a disability. It's not seen as registered as a disability. And one of the most common things that you can do with long COVID, and long COVID effectively, just for those who aren't familiar with it, because it is a new and emerging term, are either the continuing symptoms after a bout of acute COVID, and they can last between 4 and 12 weeks. Alternatively, the more serious long COVID is that where the symptoms persist after 12 weeks, but cannot be diagnosed as anything else. That's the best I can offer you today, and that's the best from the NHS, and it's the best you'll get from anywhere if you care to look. So you might want to consider adjusting sickness absence triggers for example, in your sickness absence policy. That would be a reasonable adjustment to make in those cases of long COVID, Andrew.
Yep.
Just a couple of other quick pieces here. People who are more affected by long COVID tend to be older. That's us stuffed, you and me, ethnic minority groups and women. So just be aware of those three groups in particular, that they're being treated as fairly as everybody else. The last thing you want is a discrimination claim on your door, if that's not the case. And occupational health, if your school has access to an occupational health service, most schools do. And if not, now's the time to perhaps think about getting access to an occupational health service, and your HR provider can provide you with the details of their sources. They're also a particularly good source of information if you want to manage high profile cases or cases that you believe aren't going to be resolved within an acceptable period of time. And there's a second very good document, Andrew, that's, again, the link is in this document that I'm sending out, that has come from the Occupational Medical Authority, and it's about dealing with returners from long COVID as well. So treat it as a respiratory infection. Use those guides that are linked in the document. Use your sickness absence management procedure, and speak to your HR so that there's consistency across your school and others within your authority or within your trust or within your federation. That's all I had to say on COVID and long COVID. I mean, I hope that the cases will begin to diminish, but we're seeing more and more cases of acute COVID, even those people have been double jabbed and boosted, but at least they're not ending up in hospital as they might have done without those boosters and other jabs, inoculations as well.
I wonder if anybody on the call has been contacted to have another booster yet, because I haven't. It's been a good long time since.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It feels like we should be having another round again now.
I think I think from last Monday, the over 75s, which thankfully count us out, were invited for a booster on top of their booster.
Yeah.
But I've certainly had, I've certainly been double jabbed and boosted.
Yeah, me too.
Booster.
I should have another booster soon. That's what I was thinking. So maybe they're starting with them, and then it'll come to young whippersnappers eventually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll be part of that group any day of the week. So that's really on long COVID. I hope that's going to satisfy people, and there's more detail in the document that people will be sent.
It's a great document.
Don't worry, it's all the answers you'll need are in that document if I haven't answered them already. Yeah.
Terrific. So this time of year, isn't it, when we're thinking about premises?
It is, and I've taken a couple of calls from members recently about what they can do. And I think this is particularly apposite when the evenings get lighter, the school grounds more in use, whether that's legal or sort of uninvited guests after the school bell's gone. But I think it's a time of year when people do begin to look at their premises, especially in light of if they want to get any works prepared for the summer. And I'm sure most people on this call will have had this licked months, years, days, weeks ago. But if anything, Andrew, it's really just a sort of shout out to any school business managers on the call, or to head teachers, school leaders on the call who may want to talk to their school business leaders following this webinar. There's a couple of documents that I really wanted to highlight. And one of them is called the Good Estate Management for Schools. The acronym is GEMS, Good Estate Management for Schools. This is particularly good. There it is. Thank you very much. This is the sort of go-to place, really. The link is in the document that will be available after this webinar, because it really does give you a self-assessment tool, which will give your school a management action plan. Once you can see the self-assessment tool just on that number 2 in the little black box. And I think that's particularly good if you want a sort of ready-made action plan for your school. But the guide also includes other things like checklists on energy and water usage, health and safety links, and compliance with everything that a school needs to do. It is really the go-to place. So I've just wrapped some notes around that in the document. And while we're on the topic, Andrew, asbestos, I know it's not a sexy topic, but I think you can't do one without the other. Most buildings, in fact, this always surprises people when I tell them, most schools, most public buildings, in fact, that were built before 2000, the year 2000, will have asbestos in them. Asbestos was only banned as a substance in the year 2000.
2000? As recently as that?
As recently as that.
Good Lord, I thought it was sort of 70s or 80s.
Yeah, you would think so, wouldn't you? You would think so. But no, any building built before the year 2000, and that includes houses as well, is more than likely to contain some form of asbestos, but especially in public buildings. And there's a very good site that you've kindly got up there for me, Andrew. That is, again, I just wanted to refer people to this to make sure that they were aware that it existed. Some don't. Some schools will have completed asbestos management plan or map, as it was known. The deadline for that was last July. But some schools will have done that because it's important when your building work happens that the builders, the contractors that you hire, are aware of where asbestos is in your school. And the most advice that comes out of any credible body is just don't touch it. But you need to know where it is in order to avoid touching it. So again, it's a really good document. We often get this around Christmas when schools are busy banging things into walls to hang up decorations. Little do they know they might be releasing particles of asbestos if they're banging them into the wrong types of wall. So it's a real tricky one, but ultimately a school leader has the overriding ability to keep people safe in the school. And one of the best ways to do that is to make sure you've got a safe building and know where your asbestos is. Absolutely. Yeah. So apologies for taking up minutes on the asbestos topic, but it's important. It is very important. And of course, until you have an asbestos plan done or an assessment or a survey, and those that don't know may want to have a survey, then you don't know whether you're dealing with a tip of the iceberg or the iceberg itself. And Guy, can I ask, from a compliance point of view, what sort of paperwork will Ofsted be looking for? I mean, we're a sitting duck at the moment. We're due for Ofsted any moment. I just know it. So you get past sort of, what is it, 10:30 on a Monday morning, and you breathe a sigh of relief, basically. What would they be looking for from an asbestos point of view in terms of our paperwork? They'd be looking for schools to have completed an asbestos survey map. Yep. Okay. And this was something that the DFE publish regularly and send out to schools. Yeah. You'll get it sent automatically if you're registered with the DFE and have a DFE number. Yeah. Your responsibility as a school leader is to complete that asbestos management assessment plan. It's called AMAP. They love their acronyms at the DFE. And effectively, Ofsted will expect you to have completed that by the deadline. This year's deadline, the past, what deadline's just gone was back in July. but there'll be another one. But I think even if you typed in AMAP into a Google website, you'd find when the next iteration is, it's almost like a census of asbestos that schools can then complete, but schools are reminded to complete it. There's no punishment if you don't, other than, as you say, if Ofsted come calling, they may want to see that you've ticked that box.
Yeah.
And if you haven't, you might find yourself in a difficult situation.
This is
there it is.
Yeah. I need to get across this. I need to get across this. I really do.
Yeah. There's a lot of information there. As you'll see, there's 15 pages and lots of, but ultimately you just need to complete the return. Effectively, it's a return that schools have to complete periodically.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether it's annual or not. It's when the DfE send it out.
Yeah.
And in effect, that counts as your proof, your evidence that you've disclosed as much as you know, and that you have a plan in place to effectively mitigate the risks of the map. You'll see there that's it, AMAP. You'll see there that there's some detail around it. It's been in place for several years. March 2018. So it's something that hopefully schools will have probably come across, but it may be worth checking with your school business manager if this isn't something you're ultimately familiar with.
Yeah. Thank you, Guy. That's brilliant, as always. I've actually added it onto my list of things. I'm meeting with her tomorrow. Wednesday afternoons, I sit down with the business manager. I've now added it to the agenda.
He or she will be thrilled.
Oh, yes, she will. Along with health and safety walk, and God knows what else we're doing tomorrow. Okay, good. Actually, I'll tell you what we're doing tomorrow. We're looking at work that we can get done on the premises during the Easter holidays. That's exactly what we're doing. So
there you go. Well, hopefully these are two documents that will help you, guide you in the right way.
Thank you. Good.
Right. I think we're going to talk about staff appraisal.
I think so, unless there's anything else on the premises. I tell you what, before we do though, Guy, if you're happy, I've just got a quick question from Kevin that just relates back to the discussions we had just now about long COVID. So can I pose that now? We might as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So, thank you, Kevin. So Kevin says, when unions talk with MATs around long COVID and sickness policies and sick pay, are there any particular points that should be raised?
Well,
specifically what you mean there. But
I think so. I mean, ultimately, if the purpose of the trade union is to protect the interests of their members, and schools may be perhaps rather robust in their approach to this. I think one of the things that trade unions can do is to make sure that there is a simple and fair system of managing COVID absence. And that's why earlier I suggested that they may want to try and talk to schools about having not a separate procedure, because it will fall under the sickness absence procedure, but having a recognized set of reasonable adjustments that can be made for people with either diagnosed long COVID or undiagnosed long COVID. Because if it's the more serious of the two long COVIDs, which is the 12-week plus one, where people are effectively suffering from the symptoms but without any diagnosis of any alternative medical condition, it will be deemed to be long COVID. And I think what they need to make sure is that those sickness absence triggers, the things that trigger someone into progressing through the procedure, are measured and reasonable. So I think it's very much having, and of course, making sure that there is perhaps additional consideration, not provision, but additional consideration for older people, people from an ethnic minority, and women, who those are the three groups that tend to be slightly more at risk of COVID and long COVID than any other groups of individuals. So I think reasonable steps to progress through the sickness procedure, and modified steps if possible.
Yeah. Gosh, we could talk about that all day, but should we move on? I've got a million questions I could ask, but I think we'll take that offline because I don't want to dominate it, only because it's very prescient at the moment here.
Yeah, it's
We
a
could,
tricky one.
yeah.
But,
I agree. Let's move on, Guy, because I don't want that to dominate again. And it's not about me. It's about staff appraisal next.
staff appraisal. Well, again, it's that time of year where people start thinking about it because they think, oh gosh, there's one more term. We're coming up to end of term 2, or term 5. There's only or 5 and 6 left, rather, term 4. There's only 2 left, and then all of a sudden I'm going to be scrutinized, and my pay will be determined upon based upon that. So I thought it would be quite good just to again highlight some of the issues that are probably most commonly brought to the NEHT. So the first one, I just want to talk about the standards. We're all familiar with these, I'm sure. The teacher standards have been in place for almost 10 years, would you believe? Since 2013, they came into force in 2012 and came into use on the 1st of September 2013. And as we know, they're a code for good teaching practice and professional conduct. So it's not unreasonable that schools expect their teachers to do them, to comply and to perform to those standards. One that I thought might be interesting to, and there they are. And we've got a piece on this, Andrew, as I'm sure you know, in the Advice Hub.
Yes.
The head teacher standards, are very, very much first of all, let me make the point, they're non-statutory. So schools, effectively, that means that schools don't have to use them at all. And they have no sort of statutory force or use. They're really helpful, though, to make sure that they're helpful to shape school leaders' development. And school leaders do need to develop because they'll be at various stages of their career.
Sure.
It helps to underpin the appointment of school leaders because the profile, the blueprint effectively is there. And it also helps to inform their performance management arrangements once they've joined as well. But they're non-statutory. In most schools I'm aware of, they're used, I'd call it, in a light touch way. But I think they're a useful document. They've been in place for a number of years. These things don't just happen by accident. The trade unions, one or two working charities, and the DFE all design the teacher standards, whether they're the head teacher standards or the teacher standards or other standards beneath those standards I've just mentioned. So I always think they're helpful, they're useful, especially in the appointment of head teachers and their ongoing school leadership of the school and their development. So it's really important, though, that people understand that they're non-statutory. So they have no legal force as such. They're more of a moral code in that respect. The teacher standards are the only standards that are statutory, and they have been for almost 10 years. So effectively, that means that they're in force. It means someone can be dismissed for breach of the teacher's standards. That's what I mean by statutory. And there's a really good document, that's the one you've got, Andrew, where they're all on one side of A4.
I've used this so many times in schools. I used to laminate it and keep it on my notice board. And when staff came in and I pulled it off the notice board, they always knew that we were going to be talking about standards.
And it's surprising when I speak. Yeah. Well, I'm always surprised when I speak to school leaders, and generally around October, November time, when someone is perhaps complaining about or raising a grievance about their performance appraisal and their pay, that they're little used, and I just think, well, actually, they're not actually objectives themselves, but you can always peg one of your objectives to one or more of the standards. So whatever you're asking your teachers to do, and it's generally around improving pupil outcomes, you can then find one of those that, or perhaps more than one, and perhaps one from part one and one from part two. And part two, if you scroll down, Andrew, if you don't mind, just to on the bottom right hand side is where the professional conduct comes in. And it's, you know, it's not unreasonable, I think, to expect a teacher to perform to those standards. The NHT endorse them. I think they're a fine set of principles by which the profession, and that's what makes it a profession. It has a set of professional standards and ethics to work to.
I wonder whether it's worth just mentioning, Guy, that in the Pathway platform, of course, we have a skills audit, and which is one of the many functions within Pathway. And in the skills audit, it's divided into two, as you know. We have teacher standards and we have school leader standards, if you like. And we've gone for each of those standards, and we've given users of Pathway the opportunity to upload the areas for development and the areas that they feel they're kind of smashing, really, based on those teacher standards, which creates sort of almost an audit, which, let's face it, is really designed as a discussion prompt for appraisal meetings.
Absolutely.
It's been really well received, actually, that skills audit in the Pathway program. Yeah,
it's a great part of the program, and I think this is where I always start with school leaders.
Yeah,
everyone has their strength and weakness, and sometimes when people struggle with performance management and objective setting, I say go back to the basics of go back to the teacher's standards and look at the prompts and set your teacher one or two objectives that are obviously relatable to your school.
Absolutely.
But you can link back to one of the standards. And it becomes, you know, a much more straightforward exercise in that respect. In fact, it's once I think people have made those connections, and most people do, but actually it's a very straightforward process from there on. But don't forget about part two, often overlooked. And the reason why most people are dismissed from the profession is a breach of part two, not part one.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it is.
So don't forget part two.
Good.
I've also made reference in the document that people have, Andrew, to the higher level teaching assistant standards and the teaching assistant standards, and also the standards that apply in Wales as well. There are a slightly different set of standards that apply in Wales. Same principles. They've been in place now for 3 or 4 years. They're fresher, they're newer, and perhaps more relatable to Wales. But all the links to all of those documents, including the full fat and the abbreviated version that you've just shown, are provided in that document. But I think it's this isn't the full discussion on staff praise, but I just think it's the best starting point for me. Teaching is a profession. And what makes it a profession is that you have a set of professional standards to work to, and those are them. The only just very quickly, the only exceptions where you don't apply the teacher standards is to where somebody is on induction, doing their statutory induction. Somebody is serving 1 term or less. So there has to be a minimum eligibility period to actually qualify to be held account against the teacher standards. And thirdly, if someone's on a capability or the subject to a capability procedure. So those are the 3 exceptions where you wouldn't apply the teacher standards, or they'd have no statutory force.
Great.
I suppose what I wanted to do is just to go on to a few sort of pitfalls and helpful reminders. I'm not going to tell people how to do performance appraisals. They're teachers. They'll know how to do them most of the time. But I think where I wanted to make some points, Andrew, with the validity of these points is where performance appraisal comes unstuck. and where school leaders often face the challenge from people, normally at the pay appeal, because the pay determination goes with the staff appraisal. So they're effectively, when they're appealing their pay decision, they're effectively appealing their sort of staff appraisal as well. So, and I saw a question come up there, and I'll happily dig into that in a moment. But I think it's really helpful, like so many things go wrong in the planning. I think where people are helping to set objectives, it's really helpful to set out the sort of evidence that you'll be looking for in order to satisfy that objective. Don't make the evidence up as you go along or present it. I think there should be no surprises. If you want person A to achieve B, C, and D, you need to let them know what evidence you need to substantiate B, C, and D.
Yes, you do. Not fair otherwise. No,
absolutely. Now, I know some schools have actually, created their own templates to make sure that they've got all these boxes that they can just very simply complete. And you'll never escape from the fact that performance appraisal staff appraisal is a process with paperwork. The simpler you can make it, the better. I think also you want to signal, which is why I'm raising it now actually, where you think one of your staff members isn't performing, it's probably best not to tell them at the appraisal. It's probably best to tell them now. I mean before the Easter holiday, and that's why I put it on the agenda. And I'll tell you why. It doesn't surprise them in the summer when you have that difficult conversation with them to say you haven't achieved X or Y or Z. Secondly, you're giving them a chance to improve between now and the end of the year, and there still is time to improve, especially if someone's not that far behind. But you're avoiding that difficult conversation by effectively signaling the shortfalls that they have, that they're experiencing right now. So I think it's a particularly relevant time to highlight that. Do you want me to sort of answer that question? That someone?
Yeah. What would be used in the case of capability? Is it specifically focused on targets? It's a good question from Emma.
Right. Yes, I mean, as I said, Emma, the person who's the subject of capability wouldn't be part of the performance appraisal process because effectively they've stepped out of it into a sort of other stream, if you like. With capability, you would look to set a different set of objectives, targets, and those against which that person had fallen short. So if it was pupil progress, you may want to provide some sort of manageable but achievable capability objective related to pupil progress and relate it back. You can still use the standards as part of the capability process. So, wherever they've fallen short, but you would still expect them to perform in all the other usual areas as well.
You would.
Effectively, what you're looking to do is get them out of the capability process back into the standard performance management staff appraisal process, which would be the sign of success of a successful capability outcome. But so I think you just need to really define the area very carefully where they're falling short, set the objective or objectives against those shortfalls and link them back to the teacher's standards, and still expect them to achieve the other things that you would ordinarily expect from a classroom teacher, if indeed they are a classroom teacher, before you made any decision then to bring them back into the sort of universal fold of staff appraisal. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, brilliant.
A couple of other points I just wanted to raise, Andrew, if that's okay. One is, sometimes last year I took a lot of calls from members who told me that they'd had an unsatisfactory performance appraisal. They weren't really prepared to make a pay recommendation based on it, and they couldn't quite put their finger on it. And it was only when I'd had quite a good discussion with them that we sort of found out what the cause was. And the cause was they hadn't been told what success looks like.
Yeah.
And often people, just because you think you've got an idea in your head as a school leader, or you've done it before in a previous life or in your current position, don't expect them to have done it, because they may not have done it yet. It may be the first time they've ever faced tackling a particular set of activities or work. And sometimes it's helpful to actually show them an example of what success looks like. If you can't articulate it, it might be a report. It might be, a school improvement plan, a risk assessment, whatever it is. If it's tangible and it meets your standards as a school leader, show them and show them where their work is falling short. And it's far more powerful, far more acceptable by them, actually, if you can actually tell them where they're going wrong.
Quite right.
And demonstrate it.
Yeah.
They're teachers, after all. They like to learn.
They want to learn. I was just going to say, exactly. Yeah. And it becomes a more positive process then, doesn't it? Which ultimately is beneficial to the students, which is who we want to serve in the end. Yeah.
2 more points, if I may, before we go on to well-being.
Yeah.
One is that if through the appraisal process you're putting someone on an informal support plan, because it's the first time that you've done it, or you've actually determined through the appraisal that they should be on a support plan, be really clear about what support you're going to provide to them, and front load it. And by that I mean it needs to be fairly thick at the front. The support needs to be fairly thick at the front end and taper off, because the whole point of the support plan is, as a school leader, at the end of that period, you want to be able to determine that they're unconditionally capable. And the mistake a lot of leaders make is that they keep ploughing the support in and then take it away on the final day of the support plan, and that person falls flat on their face because you've unfortunately taken away all the support that they've been used to.
Absolutely.
You can't go through life giving them unconditional support. So I think you have to identify the shortfall, design the mitigation to that shortfall, apply it thickly, let it taper off over a period of weeks. And depending on, I'm often asked, how long should an informal support plan be in place for? And my answer is always the same: it depends. Minimum 4, maximum 10 weeks, depending on where someone is in their career stage. If someone's fairly advanced in their career stage, you would expect them to make fairly rapid improvement. If someone's fairly new, might be a QTS, and they've just read the wrong mood music, you might want to give them a little longer. Some people are late developers, or sort of take a little bit more time to get to the finishing line. So 10 weeks is the max. And I've saved my favorite to last, Andrew, on appraisal, because it is one that comes up year on year since I've been at the NAHT for the last 10 years. People on maternity leave and other absences, how on earth do we evaluate their performance? They haven't been here. They've been having a baby. They've been caring for their elderly relative for 6 months. They've been on a sabbatical. We get it all, honestly. It's you can imagine, can't you?
Oh yeah, I can imagine. Yeah,
20,000 schools. It doesn't take a big percentage to make the lines very warm for a while. I think what people need just to accept and understand is that you can't determine a pay evaluation or a performance evaluation and a pay determination on speculation. Might have done had they been here. You have got to base that judgment on actual service. So you either have a discussion with them before they leave, if that's during the performance year, and capture what they've got. If they're away from the 1st of September to the 31st of July, as some people might be, and they haven't been there for the whole of the performance year, you then look at the previous performance year and base it on that performance.
Right.
As a school leader, you are less likely to be challenged on basing any performance judgment on actual service than you would on speculation.
Speculative stuff, yeah, I agree.
So, if someone has achieved a particular rating over the last 3 years, the chances are they will have, that it's fair to base it on those last 3 years, because that's probably what they would have done in the 4th year. But don't base it on, I think they would have got better, or I think they would have deteriorated. I think you just have to say, let's look back at the last year or two, see how they've done, and we effectively give them that same performance rating. Failure to do that will be automatic discrimination. So it's a fairly powerful activity to get right. So I said, failure to sort of, if you base it on speculation, you will be challenged, and you are more than likely to lose the argument. And no school leader wants to be on the wrong side of the argument.
Absolutely right.
Always on the right side of the argument.
Absolutely right. And in the human resources section of Pathways Advice Hub, which is extensive, we do have a model staff appraisal capability policy, which you kindly uploaded for us. And I've got that here, actually. Do you want me to share any of that, or do you want to wait until the next thing when we go into?
No, please do. Please do, Andrew.
Have a quick look, actually. I just noticed I haven't yet, so I'll just quickly share that, if I may. So what I'm talking about, of course, very briefly, because I know we've got another big agenda, big item coming up, is I'm in just to orientate people on the call, if you're unfamiliar. I'm in Pathway at the moment. It's 3 different sections. I'm going into the reflection section, which houses 2 main sections: the wellbeing program from Professor Tim O'Brien and Dr. Dennis Garney, an amazing program on wellbeing, which we're going to be talking about in a moment. And of course, Guy's Advice Hub that he kindly lead authors and edits for us. All those different tiles contain a treasure trove of articles from Guy and his team. This is HR, which, as a fellow school leader, you'll know, like me, is going to be pretty big, isn't it? Let's be honest, it's going to be a lot of stuff in HR. And scrolling all the way down, there's so many different brilliant pieces here, actually, which are really helpful for school leaders to keep us on the straight and narrow. And if I go down to here, there's a model staff appraisal capability. Here we go. So there's a lot of very useful stuff here if you're wanting to just have a refresh, have another look at your policy, and make sure you're on the straight and narrow. So there's all the guidance that you could possibly need now to make sure that you're conducting your appraisals in the correct way, legally and reasonably. So thank you for that, Guy. Brilliant piece.
No, that's and right at the very top, to prove it is a model policy, you can literally cut and paste it off and put your school name on it.
You can save this as a PDF, open up your Word document, and then open this in Word, and you can edit it. It's terrific. So brilliant piece. And this is for this academic year, isn't it? 21-22.
It is. So the heavy lifting's been done for you.
Absolutely.
All you have to do is effectively insert your school and the year, but we'll obviously update it if there are any significant changes. But it's one that's been adopted by many schools, and it's come from obviously our raft of wisdom accumulated over many years at the NAHT and the DFE like it as well.
We're very lucky to have that, and it's from being on the back phone to head teachers every day for all these years. So thank you for that, Guy. Just thought I'd share that. Brilliant.
Great.
Right.
Well, this is a session that everyone is really looking forward to. Wellbeing. I mean, how can we ignore it this year? How could we have ignored it ever? It seems to be something that sort of, seems to be on vogue at the moment. It never ought to have been. It ought to have been always on vogue. And never before has the well-being of school leaders been more important. I know that sounds like a cheap throwaway remark, but I just thought I'd read out two very quick definitions of well-being, because I'm always a little bit skeptical about well-being and what it means, because it will mean different things to different people. And there's two here that I particularly like. And you know, everyone that, even Dr. Dennis Guiney, who runs the brilliant well-being piece on Pathway, says, you know, there's no universally acceptable definition of well-being. The one I like is well-being is about people, is about how people are made to feel as they go about their work. That's my favorite because I remember it.
Yeah.
The other one, which comes from education support, which is, anyone that is old enough will know that that used to be called the Teacher Support Network, is well-being is a sense of purpose, achievement and contribution, and a balance between the challenges one has to deal with and the resources to overcome them. A little more deeper and academic, which is why I prefer the first one, because I can remember it. It's about how people are made to feel as they go about their work. So the question conjures up in my mind, a lot of head teachers ask, well, are we allowed, do we get it? Do we get well-being? Not do we understand, but are we entitled to it almost? There's that sort of level of public service that almost is belittled by this need to, and you know, the answer is absolutely. You get it by law. You get it, it's written in a document called the STPCD, the School Teachers Terms and Conditions document. And that sets out in law that you are entitled to well-being. The two quotes, I won't read them out because they're quite long, but they're reasonably long. They're in this paper that everyone will get. So I've actually extracted the relevant parts for you from the STPCD.
Yeah, I've got that.
This is in a document that we've got on our website, of the Pathway Advice Hub. We've put it under leadership.
Yeah, we haven't we? We were looking at it just earlier on, actually, Guy, weren't we? And
Andrew and I decided to put it under leadership because where can well-being go? But it's effectively your well-being as a school leader, and it's a guide to your well-being. And this is a really good document, actually. I don't say that because I wrote it. It's good because actually there were so many sources from which to draw. And there's lots there. There's two quotes from the STPCD I was referring to. And it has the reason I like it has a number of checklists, some of which, all of which will apply to you as a school leader or an aspiring school leader, but others of which will appeal to individuals because some individuals may find it easier to achieve than others. But I do like the section on achieve your well-being through others. I wouldn't I? Because it's the art of delegation as a school leader, and some of well-being does rather rely on school leaders letting go, not abdication of accountability, but abdication of responsibility. So you can see there on the screen that Andrew's sharing, I hope you can see some very straightforward things about achieving well-being in your school, where you have limited input as the school leader, and you're very much letting go and letting others achieve it for you. So you develop a well-being culture rather than well-being individually led. There's also a list of really great well-being practices there. Again, very simple, very straightforward. Delegation, hygiene factors, which, if you're not familiar with them, are effectively your school's environment and its welcoming feel. There's everything else there that ought to be there. And then my favorite part of the section is this, what about my well-being? And there was just some of those, Andrew, I just wanted to highlight. The first one is the third bullet point down, which is, and I've said it before in another webinar, but I think a lot of people just literally go in and make a list of everything they get to do. And a little bit like Andrew, just before he joined the call, said, I haven't had anything to eat or drink since 5:30 this morning. And I'm sure you won't mind me saying that. Well, I've said it now anyway.
Yeah, but look what I've got for the end of this webinar.
Yeah.
I'm waiting till 5 o'clock to eat it.
The sugar rush. But one of the best little tips I've ever heard is actually build your breaks in first. Don't build them in later. Build them in first and work around them. The other one I quite like about that is and we've had lots of calls on this, is if you don't feel well, go home, get better, and get your deputy to deputize. That's what they're paid to do. That's what they get paid well to do. That's what they're trained to do. And that's what I mean. Actually, bit of well-being means sometimes letting go and letting others take the reins. So if you don't feel well, go home, get better, and you'll let your deputy deputize. The other two that I'd quite like to highlight there are points 8 and 9. Build well-being into the CPD for the SLT, teaching and support staff. So build it into your CPD. It could be the inset days, for example. And one that I particularly like and that I developed with a colleague of mine, Liam, was make well-being one of your performance management objectives.
That's interesting.
And it's a lot of, we get lots of oohs and ahs when we present in person at that one. And, who wants to be a governor with a head teacher who's off a lot of the time with, common ailments or perhaps something more serious? You want a head teacher, and as you'll know, Andrew, and as everyone on the call knows, you have got to be on your game every minute of every day of the school term, and often in between. And if you're not, that's when mistakes are made. That's when balls get dropped. So make it one of your performance management objectives. Why not? And that's very much about day-to-day things. The next section that I just refer to here is actually looking at, and this is looking through the lens of the week rather than just the immediacy of the day. And there's some really nice ones here that, I've actually followed this. I've just had 2 weeks off, which is why I'm sort of rather bright-eyed and bushy-tailed today.
Good.
But things like planning your weekend so you can use that time to your best. So you come back on Monday morning rather than, I've actually achieved very little this weekend, to actually I went to see this, I watched a film, we went for a walk. But those things need planning. There are fairly sort of motherhood and apple pie there, but the two I'd quite like to just highlight as well. In fact, 4, manage your health. Recognize it's something that you need to manage. School leaders are often of an age where their health was better when they were younger. You can often get an MOT, a well man or a well woman consultation, lots of private health providers, and often surgeries, state-funded surgeries provide them. Getting your finances into order gives you great peace of mind. And often that peace of mind leads to you feeling better about life and about yourself. And the last two on that list, Andrew, I like, and they're actually bits of advice I gave to someone with a chronic back pain who kept on having time off work. And I said, how old's your bed? And she said about 20 years old. And I said, well, buy a new bed. That's my advice. And she did. And she was back to work in 3 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And it was her bed.
Yeah.
You spend a third of your life on it. Some people spend more, but you know, and I do like that last quote.
Yeah, me too.
You know, it's one that I think is quite relevant. Most school leaders I know are control freaks. And I mean that, I say that with a tongue in my cheek, and mean it with great affection, because someone needs to be. But you're looking for good, you're not looking for perfect all the time. And I just think that's perhaps one that ought to go up in lots of head teachers' schools.
Yeah, it's a relentless pursuit of perfection will get you in the end.
Absolutely.
Really well. I mean, not for me, because I've achieved it already. Oh, so true. Wise words, Guy.
I just think I just finish, Andrew, because we have run out of time, but I just would finish with Tim Bowen, our president of the NHT, has had well-being as his theme this year. Every year we elect a new president, and each president has a theme. And this is the quote he's provided. And I quite like it. I thought it was a bit pedestrian at first, and then I hope Tim's not listening. If you are, Tim, I apologize, because I'll pay you a big compliment afterwards. But he said the need for school leaders to prioritize their well-being has never been greater. As a school leader, you have to look after yourself. You cannot meet everyone else's needs yet ignore your own. And this is the bit where I really pay Tim a big compliment. By putting yourself first, at least for some of the time, you are in effect putting your school first. And I like that. I think it's a nice point to end on.
Absolutely.
So I know we've gone horribly over time, and
no, it's super. Really good, actually, Guy. That's spot on, and I think that's exactly what we all needed to hear, actually, if I may say. And we've got another one coming, actually. I'm just going to share the screen. Stay on if you're able to. I'm just going to share the screen very quickly, just to remind people that we're coming again soon to have another webinar along the same lines. We're going to be meeting on Wednesday, the 11th of May at 4 p.m. for another advice for the current times. And let's hope by then we've had a rest and we feel ready to go again, actually. I really hope that everybody's heeded the advice that we've had, as we always do from the brilliant Guy, to put ourselves first, maybe just a little bit over the Easter holidays.
Absolutely. Good. Brilliant. Thank you. Good to join you again, Andrew.
Great to see you again, Guy. Absolutely brilliant. Thanks so much. And anybody wants to find out more about, we've been mentioning Pathway a little bit during this webinar, then of course go to this URL here, and I'm sure it'll take you straight to find out some web pages where you can find out much more about this amazing program, which is fundamentally built on the whole teacher rather than just a brain on legs. There's a whole person there, and it's looking at the whole aspects of motivation and well-being and all those different things, as well as your professional knowledge and skills. So and thank you so much, Guy, for the integral role that you play in Pathway every week. You're always sending me new documents, so thank you. Great stuff.
Bye, everyone.
With that, we'll bid you farewell. Take care.
Bye-bye.